Is everyone ready? Hello. I'm Christy Shane, Director of Communications at the South Carolina Department of Corrections. That's CHRYSTISHAIN. The capital punishment sentence for Stephen Corey Bryant was carried out tonight pursuant to the order of the South Carolina Supreme Court and in accordance with state law. The execution was performed by a 3-person firing squad and began at 6:02 p.m. He was pronounced dead by a physician at 6:05 p.m. Bryant, 44, was sentenced to death for crimes committed during an 8-day Sumter County crime spree in October 2004 in which he murdered 3 people: Willard T.J. Tijan, 62, Clifton Gainey, 36, and Christopher Burgess, 35. He was sentenced to death for murdering Tijan, whom he shot 9 times, burned his face and eyes with a cigarette, and wrote, "Catch me if you can," on the wall in the victim's blood. Bryant did not make a final statement. Witnesses to the execution included 3 members of the Tijan family, a representative from the Third Circuit Solicitor's Office, which prosecuted the cases, a representative from the Sumter County Sheriff's Office, Bryant's attorney, and 3 members of the news media who will address you in just a minute. After all 3 speak, they will answer questions from the podium. They will not be available for interviews after the press conference ends because they have to write their stories as well. First, Jeffrey Collins from the Associated Press.
I'm Jeffrey Collins with the Associated Press. That's JEFFREYCO. I'm just going to kind of lay out how things went from start to the end. We got inside the capital punishment facility about 5:57. The curtain was raised in front right at 6, promptly at 6. Bryant was already strapped into the chair, as the other 2 inmates who have faced the firing squad have been strapped. Nothing was much different than that. His arms were strapped down, legs were strapped. There's a strap around his head. He didn't have a final statement, so the hood was placed on his head shortly after the 6 o'clock when the curtain was raised. At 6:01 in about 15 seconds, that's when the one of the prison employees went over and raised the shade where the shooters are. And then about 55 seconds later, that's when the shots rang out. During those 55 seconds, Bryant, obviously was breathing, but he wasn't breathing as heavy as the other 2 firing squad inmates I've seen that had some very deep breaths. His breaths were a little more shallow before it happened. The shots fired. The target that was on his chest, it's a red bullseye, it actually flew off several feet in front of him. And at that point, there were several shallow breaths over the next 30 seconds. Bryant made no noise. He didn't. There was absolutely no noise in the chamber at all outside of the gunshots. And shallow breaths for about 30 seconds. Then there appeared to be no breathing except for about, I would say, roughly about 1 minute and 10 seconds after that initial shot. There was like a spasm, maybe a cough, just like something that was like an involuntary or maybe an involuntary. It's just like a jerk, like a cough or something along those lines. The doctor came in 15 seconds after that. Doctor examined him for about a minute with a stethoscope, and he was pronounced dead about right at 6:05. And I have a different angle, so I'm going to let Ted Clifford talk about, he saw actually what the wound and everything looked like, so I'm going to let Ted talk about that part.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ted Clifford. That's TEDCLIFFORD, and I'm with the state newspaper. I think Jeffrey did a good job of laying out the times. We arrived there just before 6. The curtain opened pretty much right at 6. The shots were fired at about 6:02. The moment the shots were fired, as Jeffrey said, the target, which imagine a white Post-it note sized piece of paper with a red bullseye on it, flew off his chest about halfway across the room. It looked like it landed somewhere behind the electric chair, which is placed in the middle of the room. Over the next couple of minutes, his body was, very still, other than the small movements that Jeffrey described. but you could start to see a sort of a spreading kind of pool of wetness across his chest. They're wearing black, so you couldn't, it's obviously blood. You can't see necessarily that it's blood. I think Jeffrey again hit on many of the key points, but just to mention a few other details, he's strapped back with his arms behind him. There's a sling around his neck that sort of pushes his face up, and you could see he gave a very quick glance towards the witnesses, but he didn't stare. He didn't appear to look around the room. He mostly stared forwards until the hood was put on. His hands are in mittens, and then by 6:04, when death was pronounced, I mean, the body was completely still. There was no movement to speak of.
My name's Naomi Popa. I'm with WIS in Columbia. That's spelled NAOMI for Naomi and POPA for Popa. Similar to those standing with me, I kind of want to go back to the room a little bit for those that are not familiar with what this room looks like, or have seen the photo that the media does have. You are seated in somewhat of 3 rows in this room. We entered just before 6 o'clock. You've got metal bars that are on the ceiling, and then in front of you are 6 windows and a door with a window on top, and then several sets of windows on top of that. And in front of that, all metal navy blue bars. That curtain that was draped across was about burgundy, dark, deep red sort of color. That curtain opened at right around 6 o'clock, and then at 6:01, the hood was placed over his head, similar to what was already mentioned. He was mostly looking straight forward. He did not appear, at least in the vision in the area that I was in, did not appear to glance over. But again, all 3 of us sat in very different, not next to each other, but had different views. That hood was placed over his head, and his demeanor was forward. He was wearing somewhat of mittens, black gloves that were kind of chained or kind of tucked behind his side. His feet were also shackled to the chair. And for those that are unfamiliar, this room, he was placed, if you're a witness and you're observing forward, he's in the left corner, kind of tucked away with that white post-it kind of strapped onto his chest there with the red bullseye. Notably, that bullseye, as we mentioned, went forward. It shot forward as soon as the shots were fired, and those shots were fired at 6:02. He took several deep breaths. His chest seemed to, the best way that I can describe it, kind of rose and fell shortly after the shots were fired. And within about a minute, the doctor entered and checked multiple locations on his body for a pulse. After that, the doctor left. That took about a minute, and then right at 6:05, he was announced dead.
Go ahead. Do you have any questions, please?
Did you guys see any reactions from the witnesses? Did they have anything to say?
Thank you for answering that, because I realized I didn't tell you all about the witnesses. So there were 3 members of the victim's family, and they sat on the front row as they always do, and the 3 of them held hands. And there was, as always, whenever the shots are fired, all 3 times, people flinch. I don't think it's impossible not to, because you have no warning that the shots are coming. But beyond that, there was no real, them holding hands and that flinching, there's no real reaction from any of the witnesses in the room. Everybody was just staring straight ahead and looking at what happened. Yeah.
Because you've witnessed the 2 others, you described that there was like more shallow breathing compared to the 2. Were there any other differences you noticed?
There were a couple of differences. The first 2, Brad Sigmund and Mikhail Mahdi, their breathing was much deeper after the hood was put over their head. Like, they were taking, I mean, almost like, I don't want to say nervous breaths, but they're taking very deep breaths before. Bryant had no real reaction. I mean, like I said, I can't 100% definitively tell you that he was looking at us when the curtain opened. I mean, his eyes glanced that way, but is it the same kind of glance that you give whenever there's motion that direction? I don't even know if he really took in who we were. Another difference was, unlike Mahdi, there was no noise at all. He made no noise after the shots were fired. There was nothing except for the shots being fired that you could hear in the chamber itself. And then the breathing afterwards, in both the earlier ones, it seemed like they were a little deeper breathing after the shots were fired, but before breathing stopped. But again, he wasn't breathing very deeply even before the shots were fired. And I guess too, it's always interesting too to see this person in front of you that you've seen before. Like, and this is an interesting one for me because I've seen, I actually wrote a story about when he was still on the loose and it was going on in Sumter County. So that is a little bit different, but that's more in my headspace. And anyway. I mean, yeah.
Several of you have asked about Bryant's specially requested last meal. It was Asian food, spicy mixed seafood stir fry over rice, fried fish over rice, 2 egg rolls, 3 stuffed shrimp, duck and soy sauce, 2 zero candy bars, German chocolate cake, and 2 Pepsis. It was served Wednesday evening, as usual. The press area and building will be open for the next hour and will close at 7:40. After that, we'll ask you to leave as we are closing down for the evening. Thank you very much.